Hey, you awesome folks! Thanks for taking this journey of discovery with your guide, Keith Haney. You're listening to the Becoming Bridge Builders podcast, your favorite podcast for everything from racial reconciliation to education innovation, justice reform, and leading change in the 21st century. This podcast is for people who love to be challenged with difficult topics, but want practical solutions to solve these challenging issues. Becoming Bridge Builders makes change possible. Each week on the podcast, Keith invites innovative thought leaders to share how they are building bridges in their area of expertise. You will hear breakthrough ideas and concepts that are changing the world. He's featuring guests who are best-selling authors, leaders at Microsoft, entrepreneurs, leading educators, professors, lawyers, and so many more. Listen in to learn how you can be the bridge to the change you are seeking.
Is Julie Pham. She's a PhD and a Vietnamese-born, American-raised refugee, Cambridge-trained social scientist, an organizational development leader, an award-winning cross-sector collaborator and community organizer, and an expert on respect. It's so good to have Julie on the show. Well, Julie, it's so good to have you on the show today. Welcome.
Keith, thank you so much for inviting me.
I'm excited about having our conversation. So I'm going to give you a question I love to ask my guests as we start out the podcast. What's the best piece of advice you've ever received?
Compound interest.
Ooh, I like that.
This is what one mentor, compound interest. And this is what one mentor told me. And he said that we need to invest in relationships. We need to invest in relationships, and we have no idea how they will pay off. And yet we just need to trust that they will, and that to keep nurturing those relationships. And I think he really modeled that, and relationship building is a huge part of my life. It gives me so much joy to be in relationship with other people.
Well, and that's the secret sauce of life, isn't it? Is those connections. We saw that kind of on display the opposite way during the whole COVID thing, when we had to cut off relationships with people. It's like we kind of lost a vital part of ourselves in that time frame where we're kind of all isolated.
You know, I actually found during that time, Keith, that it was the how changed, how we connected with each other changed. I actually found that I was able to surprisingly develop some new relationships during that time. And I think it's because we took away the expectation that we had to meet in person for us to have a relationship. And I actually would email people, and there are people who I had a very loose relationship with, and they would send me long, detailed emails back. I think people were actually thirsty for relationships, hungry for relationships. And so that kind of, in a way, made the modes of communication we wouldn't normally rely on. That made it possible to deepen relationships.
Interesting. I hadn't thought of it that way.
Mm-hmm.
I'm always curious, Julie, when I talk to my guests, who are people in your journey who serve to inspire you? Because I think it's time, we don't get time sometimes to kind of thank those people for the impact they've had on our life. So who are some people in your life you want to kind of maybe give a shout out to?
Definitely the first people who come to mind are my parents. And that's because we came to, I was born in Vietnam, and my parents and I left Vietnam as boat people when I was a 2-month-old baby. And I think all the time about the courage that takes. My father had been in a re-education camp after the Vietnam War ended in 1975. He was sentenced to a communist re-education camp for 3 years. And when he got out, he just, we need to leave. And so I think all the time about what it takes to do that. And I'm reminded by this Somali British poet, Warsan Shire, who wrote, no one puts their child on a boat unless the water is safer than the land.
Oh, wow. That's interesting. It's true.
Mm-hmm. Right. And so when I think about courage, when I'm just, should I have that conversation? I'm like, oh, come on, Julie. Like, what is, and so, and then also my parents, because they started the first privately owned Vietnamese language newspaper in the in the Pacific Northwest. And so I always think of them as hustlers among hustlers. And they really taught me about entrepreneurship. And they were really my first teachers there. So I would definitely say that my parents have been an inspiration for me.
I love that. Since you kind of brought that story up, kind of tell us about your entrepreneurial journey and the lessons you learned along the way.
Yes. So like I mentioned, my parents started this newspaper. And so growing up, I would watch them sell and watch them visit customers. It was always really important to make sure that we showed appreciation to our customers, and our customers were, the majority of them were Vietnamese businesses who were advertising in the newspaper. And so I actually was trained when I went to college, I actually studied history, and my first career was in academia. So I have a PhD in history and I thought I was going to go on and be a professor of history. And so I did that for most of my 20s and I never thought I would work at the newspaper. And my parents didn't want me to work at the newspaper either until I was finishing up my, because I think with a lot of immigrant and refugee families, they think, well, we came here and we worked really hard so that you can have a professional job, right? So that you don't have to have a business, because owning a business can be really hard. And so the intention was never for me to work at the newspaper. And so what ended up happening was I was finishing up my dissertation, and I realized that I didn't want to stay in academia, and I actually wanted to try my hand at business, because I was kind of feeling that in academia things are very solitary, and I wanted to do something that was a bit more dynamic. So I wanted to try business. So I came back to Seattle, which is where I grew up, and I came back to Seattle in 2008, and this is the start of the Great Recession and also the global decline of the newspaper industry. And I decided to help run my family newspaper. And so that was the first part of getting my real life MBA. And then later on, and so, yes, like in that, Keith, I just learned so much. So I learned so much about selling, and about selling and about distribution and marketing. And so I was there for 3 years, and my brother and I actually, we bought half the newspaper from our parents. So I have 2 younger brothers. And after a year about being at the newspaper, it was just like, wow, if we could do this, mom and dad don't let us do this. And they had 2 editions of the newspaper at the time. And the newspaper was really struggling. And so we actually took out a community development loan and bought half the newspaper from them.
Wow.
So that was the first business I ever owned. And so my brother and I ran that newspaper for a few more years together. I Googled how to write business plan when we were getting that loan. And I learned so much. Oh my gosh. And we were able to accomplish so much. But after 3 years of running the newspaper, I was just, okay, I'm working with 8 people. Half of them have the same last name as me, and I need to go to a bigger org.
I get that.
And then I went into corporate for the next 9 years before I started my new business, which is called Curiosity Base, and I started that 3 years ago.
So I want to go back a little bit. Newspapers are still struggling to find their way in this digital age. So as you think about just a newspaper business today, what are some challenges that you maybe tried to overcome when you started out back in 2008 and you were in the middle of a recession, a downward turn in the economy? What did you do differently to the newspaper to make it survive during those times?
Oh my gosh. Talk about understatement. I remember 2007, things were great. In 2008, everything just flipped. And so we had to get really scrappy. And we had to do a lot of partnerships. And so during that time, they were getting ready for the 2010 census. And so the census people were bringing together a lot of different ethnic media, and because they want to do a big outreach to ethnic communities. And so I actually, in these meetings, I would talk to other ethnic media and we're like, are you struggling? We're struggling. Are you struggling? and we were all struggling. And so one of the things I did was, well, what if we work together? What if we help, because we all serve different communities, and yet our struggles are very similar, and our struggles are different from mainstream media too. And And so then I ended up creating a coalition of ethnic media. And Keith, I didn't know this word at the time, but we ended up doing, it was a public-private capacity building program. I didn't know that's what I was doing at the time.
Wow.
At the time I was like, well, all these government agencies are always reaching out to us and asking for help, and all these nonprofits are always asking for things, and these private businesses too, and we all have different things to give. And so what if we came together? And I ended up creating a program where each of these or different organizations would share what they had. So it was kind of like a stone soup, right? So what I mean by that is the Seattle Public Library taught us how to use their databases. There was a PR company that taught us how to market ourselves so we could differentiate between this Chinese newspaper and that Chinese newspaper. And they wanted access to us, right? They wanted access to our media outlets. And so we kind of all just shared what we had. And that was one of the things that I learned to do to get by during this time. And because we built that trust by being together every month in these learning together, we built these relationships. And so we learned how to take very little resources and really stretch it. So that's one of the things that I learned. And also what I learned was bringing together people from very different backgrounds. There's going to be friction that emerges in terms of how we see the world and our communication and our expectations. And oftentimes we don't have language for that. And yet trust is really important. And so there's a kind of like a lot of trying to figure things out together. And so I learned so much during that time, Keith. And I'll also say another thing. I learned so much about selling.
Right.
Because the thing about selling is, and selling advertising is both tangible and intangible. Right. And to sell the value of advertising, and to sell advertising during that time, oh my gosh, I had to learn how to hear no a lot. I had to learn how to take that no and eventually have the patience to turn it into a yes and to really build tough skin. And I remember the first time I talked to an advertising agency and they asked me all these questions. I had no idea what to do. And I told myself, I'm really bad at this right now, but I'm going to get good.
Wow.
And I also got a lot of advice from people who'd been in the business a lot longer.
That's amazing. Which kind of gets me to your one of your titles you have as a cross-sector collaborator. Collaboration is a skill. How do you get people to collaborate who come from different backgrounds, diverse settings, like you just mentioned, different languages, cultures? How do you get people to find a common place moving forward? Because that's part of my goal in this podcast is how do we build bridges when there's so much diversity in our society?
So, Keith, I have to admit, I wasn't good at it in the beginning. So I was actually pretty bad. And I was bad because I was coming from a very, in academia, it's very much focused on individual genius. And so I didn't know how to collaborate. All right. So I just, and so this is what I learned, and how I learned how to do this is very much based on just messing up along the way.
Trial and error.
And so, a trial and error, because I had to say, like in the beginning, I mean, I think often about the African proverb, if you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go together. And in the beginning, I was going very fast and I was so impatient about other people. And I was like, why are we having all these icebreakers? I don't understand why don't we just get to the work? And I was very frustrated, right? And I looked around and I realized I wasn't having fun. Other people seemed to be having fun and I wasn't having fun. And I also talked to my father is a huge mentor for me, because he would do all these things for people. I'm like, why are we putting them on the newspaper? It's not that newsworthy. And I really learned about building relationships and social capital too from him. So going to the question of how do we build bridges, that first is spending time on relationship building. That's what I had to learn the hard way. And that those icebreakers actually have a point. Sometimes they're not very well, I think, well designed. That was probably my frustration with them.
Probably.
You know, I think like, what's your favorite ice cream? I don't know if that's that interesting, but in any case, so slowing down building those relationships, and asking each other, well, can you explain what that means? Can you give examples? So in the beginning, my first encounter that was working with different ethnicities, different generations too. And then later on, and like I said, I didn't know what I was doing was public-private partnership, right? I didn't know that's what it was called until later. And then when I started working in the tech industry, because I spent 9 years in the tech industry, I started doing work around how do we bring together tech / the private sector, government, and nonprofits. Because what I found is the way that there are sector stereotypes that exist. And we talk a lot about cultural stereotypes and racial stereotypes and gender, but sector stereotypes exist. And work is really personal. Where we work, how we work is really personal. And so just recognizing the difference, acknowledging them, saying them out loud, so that is really critical, I think, to the relationship building, and spending a lot of time in the beginning building those relationships before we actually get to the work.
Sure. Yeah, I can see that. Mm-hmm. As I work a lot with people from diverse backgrounds, diversity, equity, and inclusion lately have become buzzwords that just create conflict in our society. How do we get to what you just described? 'Cause I think that's really the heart of DEI is how do we create a sense of belonging? How do we hear people that are not being heard? How do we walk alongside people for farther than just faster? So in your experience, how do we maybe give us some hints as to how do we do this better?
Stay with us. We'll be right back.
And now a word from one of our sponsors, For Freedom Mobile. If you're using AT&T, Verizon, or T-Mobile, then you're being tracked. Mobile providers collect your location, communications, internet activity, even your financial transaction. They sell that data to anyone willing to pay for it and provide it to the government without a warrant. Switch to For Freedom Mobile, and you won't ever have to worry about big tech or Big Brother tracking you through your mobile phone again. For Freedom Mobile provides secure, unlimited talk, text, and high-speed data for just $29.99 a month, and it includes free internet roaming in over 200 countries. Sign up for the service by visiting forfreedommobile.com and using the promo code BRIDGEBUILDERS to get your first month for only $9.99. See forfreedommobile.com for details, just like the number 4, freedommobile.com.
I think we need to speak really plainly. I think part of the reason why diversity, equity, inclusion can petrify people is because there's this whole vocabulary around it,
right?
And it gets more and more complicated. And then when people don't know concepts or words, then they can feel really intimidated, and then we're afraid of using the wrong word, so we don't say anything at all.
Right.
And so some people can just get scared and other people get resentful. Right. And so I think it's actually really important to speak plainly and to use stories. And so let me give you an example here. I think about I remember my dad had a social worker when he was in hospice care, and the social worker would speak to him in a really loud voice. And because he was mistaking my dad's heavy Vietnamese accent with limited hearing.
Oh,
right? So
sure.
he just speak loudly. Right. And so I just told him, hey, my dad's hearing is fine. You can speak to him on a regular voice. So you know what I didn't do, Keith? I didn't say that was a microaggression.
Yeah.
Right. Right. I didn't say like, hey, you're acting with prejudice or something like that. I just said, hey, his hearing is fine. Like, could you? And then he was like, okay. And so I think about if I had said, hey, this is what you're doing, how that would have created divides.
Right.
And so, right. And so sometimes you have to think about how do we just speak plainly to each other and about what we actually need, which is, he was like, you could just speak in a regular voice. And also thinking about vocabulary, I often think about if my parents can't understand those words, if people with limited English can't understand all this vocabulary, then we are not thinking about accessibility.
Very true. And
And
you
a
made a
lot of
good
that
point
language
just now
is not
too.
accessible.
Yeah, you made a good point in that story, because I'm thinking about when you have an opportunity, like someone that happens to your family, you have two choices. You can say, well, that was racist of you to do that. Or you could just explain, well, they don't need that. So yeah, the way you define that makes it so much easier to not offend people on the other side and get them all defensive.
Yeah, because then it distracts from the thing that I actually want done, which is like for him to lower his voice, right?
Right.
And then we've taken it to this whole other thing. And I'm like, I don't even need to have that conversation. I just need him to lower his voice. And, I could have had a conversation on why did you raise your voice, right? And I was just like, but, I'm just like, for me, let's just like lower the voice and that's fine. And he did. And so I think that we also have to keep in mind, it takes privilege to understand the word privilege, that it's used the way it's used in DEI.
Right.
Speak, right? That it actually takes privilege to sometimes to education, sometimes to these conversations, sometimes. And so how do we speak plainly with one another and just tell stories? And so oftentimes when I'm guiding people through these conversations in my work, one of the norms is to speak plainly and to not use jargon, because I actually think that can lead to intellectual bullying.
Sure.
And then it becomes about the words and not about whatever story or idea we're trying to get at, because we will use different words. And how often do we fixate on the words just because in a way that's kind of easier, right? Oh, you use the wrong word and that must mean this.
You're right. You also use the term, you're an expert on respect. I don't see a lot of respect in our society. How do we get back to that idea of, I need to respect you if I really hope that you'll respect me back?
So actually, I think yes, there are some, so I'm going to differentiate between disrespect and lack of respect in the forms that matter to me. So, and actually, just to give your audience a little bit of background. So I wrote this book called 7 Forms of Respect, and it's that shows that respect is, it's dynamic, it's subjective, it's relative, and it's also contradictory. And yet the way we talk about it, we talk about it as if it's fixed and as if it's universal, as if we all think it's the same thing. And so actually we can agree on what respect feels like: feeling seen, feeling heard, feeling appreciated. What we disagree about is, what does it look like? Because Keith, you and I may have different ideas. So for some people, it's just, being very blunt and giving candid feedback is respectful. And for other people, that's rude. Right. And so we can have different ideas of what it looks like. And so to your question about there's such a lack of respect in our society now, I actually think of it as, there's this difference between disrespect and lack of respect in the forms that matter to you. And disrespect is intentional. So it's intentional. I know, for example, Keith, I know that you don't like it when I do, when I CC you on emails and bombard you with all of this information. You're just like, no, Julie, just give me what I need. I know you don't like it, but I did it anyway.
Right.
Right. That's disrespect. And then, so that's disrespect. And then lack of respect is, oh, I didn't know that mattered to you. And maybe you told me that it wasn't a big deal. So for example, I think this comes up a lot with punctuality. So for some people, punctuality really matters. And yet if people are constantly late, they could just say, oh, it's not a big deal, but inside we're seething. Right? Like, it's like, oh my gosh, I can't believe they're late. But we actually tell them it's not a big deal that they're late. So that's lack of respect in the forms that actually matter to me. And maybe we actually even contributed to that confusion. Right?
Sure.
So So I do think that, I mean, I'm going to come from, people often, you hear this, come from positive intent. I actually think that a lot of what's happening is lack of respect in the forms that matter to us because there is a lack of communication and it's not intentional. So it's not intentionally disrespectful. I do believe disrespect happens intentionally. I just think that what happens more often is miscommunication around what respect means to one another.
So digging a little deeper with that idea, you just talk about, respect for ourselves, but if we're not being authentic with ourselves, with the issues of respect, we are not communicating properly. So we're actually contributing to our own frustration, wouldn't you say?
Yes, exactly, Keith. Yes.
So we got to
Yes, and so I actually have what I call the yeah. Well, and so here I'm going to give you something to. So when I was started to do this research, I would ask people. Actually, my first question was, "How do you want to be treated?" And then people would say, "With respect." And I'm just like, okay, what does respect mean to you? And then they would bring up the golden rule, right? Golden rule: treat people the way
you want to be treated.
You want to be treated,
right?
Right. So that's the golden rule. So, but the problem is, what if they don't want to be treated the way you want to be treated? So then there is the platinum rule. Keith, do you know the platinum rule?
No, I don't know that.
Have you heard of that one? Okay. So the platinum rule is treat people the way they want to be treated. Now, the issue with the platinum rule, it sounds good, right? But the issue with the platinum rule is, what if they don't tell you? What if they don't know? What if they're embarrassed to tell you, right? Because sometimes what we want, we just are too embarrassed to admit out loud. And also, what if they tell you and you don't want to give that to them because you don't think that's respectful?
Right.
Right. And so that's the issue with the platinum rule. So then I have what I call the rubber band rule. And so this is kind of getting at what we're talking about, authenticity and self-respect. So the rubber band rule, and for your audience will just have to imagine this. Normally I'm stretching a rubber band, and I'll do it even for the sound effect here. We are stretchy. As humans, we are stretchy. So that means because I want to be respectful to other people, Keith, maybe you like something and I'm kind of ambivalent about it, but I'll do it for you because I want to show you respect. But what happens is maybe we're in a group and there are all these people who, for example, love giving praise. It's like, oh, you're awesome. You're amazing. And I'll do it, but I kind of feel it's a bit superficial. Right. And what happens over time is we're stretching and we're stretching and we're stretching, and then we snap. We snap like a rubber band. And so the point here is I actually have to know what matters to me. Right? I have to know how I want to be respected, what's going to make me snap. And I need to be able to articulate that to myself before I can articulate it to someone else. So that authenticity, the first part is even knowing what we want, because oftentimes, because we think that the other people, that we have the same idea, if they don't give us respect in the forms that matter to us, then they're disrespecting us.
So how do we get to the point where we can figure out for ourselves what matters to us? Because it's easy for us to think we know, but I don't think we actually always know what we see as respect. So how do we get to that for ourselves?
One of my favorite questions to ask people is, who in your life, in what experiences have influenced how you think about respect? Who in your life and what experiences have influenced how you think about respect? And that way we can get at, wow, my ideas of what respect means comes from somewhere. It comes from all these different influences. It didn't just, one day I didn't just wake up and these ideas were already pre-programmed. No, it was through experience. And also the way that we think about respect can evolve and can change. And so sometimes what I'll share a story with you. For me, growing up, my mom was always late picking me up from school. She was late. She was very busy, right? And she was always late. And that gave me a lot of shame because the school staff had to wait with me. And so I thought, when I grow up, I'm not going to do that. So I literally, punctuality for me, time for me, I feel anxiety. It's a physical anxiety. And that's coming from an earlier experience and someone else could have that same experience and be like, what's the big deal? like, my parents were late. It's not a big deal, right? So we can actually have negative reaction, or we can have different reactions to the same experience. And there could be things that people do. And it's like, oh, I want to do that, or that influenced me. I'm going to do that. And we can also be, ooh, I'm not going to do that because I had that experience. So in my example is, I'm not going to do that because my mom was always really late picking me up from school. And so part of this is asking ourselves question, practicing curiosity on ourselves, like, where do my ideas of respect come from? And when we work with organizations, with groups, so many people have never even thought of that. And it's a revelation to them.
I love that. Your work sounds so interesting. So tell us what you're excited about in this season of your work.
Oh gosh, so my company, Curiosity Based, we're in our third year, and we're this small and scrappy team. And Keith, so much of what I do is it's because it's just like, I want to grow this team or this company with this group of people, because I'm just so excited about the people who I get to work with, and that they chose to be part of this journey, this learning and entrepreneurial journey with me. And so the season, that what I'm really excited about is just this growth of trying to figure how do we create a company that we all want to be a part of, and that sustains us all in all the different ways, like materially, emotionally, and I just am so excited about how we're all coming together to do that. I think that there's so much collaboration and right now.
That's exciting. When you get people you love to work with and they're sharing your vision with you, it can be an exciting time in your life.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
So, Julie, I'd love to ask my guest this question. As you think down the road, what do you want your legacy to be?
I want for people it's actually around curiosity. I want people, well, no, actually, you know what? Can I do two?
Sure.
Okay. So since we were just talking about respect, I dream that one day people will talk about forms of respect the way they talk about love languages. So that's one.
Okay.
So for us to go from, hey, I need you to respect me, to saying, hey, what are your forms of respect? These are mine. And we assume that we want to respect one another. So that's one legacy I want to leave in this world. And the other legacy I want to leave is for us to believe that we are all curious, and that we don't practice curiosity all the time. And to think of curiosity as a verb, to think of it as a practice. And so it's something that we strive to do, that we believe that we are all inherently curious, and yet there are times when it's hard to be curious, and to appreciate that, and to not take it for granted, just like we can't take respect for granted.
So if I 5 years from now start hearing respect as like if I have love languages, I'll know you've achieved it.
Yes, exactly.
When she did it, yes.
Yes, exactly. Yes, exactly. I would love that. I would love that for us, because you could just be like, hey, I interviewed her.
That's right. So, go back and look at episode 202 where she said that.
Mm-hmm.
That's so cool.
Yes.
Is there anything I haven't asked you, Julie, that we should cover?
I will just say that, because this is about building bridges, and I think one way to build bridges is to ask for help. Oftentimes we talk about offering help. Oh, just help other people, support other people. And I actually think what is more vulnerable, and what goes further in terms of building bridges, is asking for help. It's like, I know that for my business, I've had to ask for a lot of help. Right. And it feels really vulnerable to do that. And yet I think that we can't just be in this position of giving. We also have to be takers, because that's reciprocity. There's give and take there.
So remain curious is your message to the world.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So, Julie, where can people find your book, 7 Forms of Respect? And where can they find you on social media?
Yes. Yes, so you can find Seven Forms of Respect, a guide to a guide to transforming your communication relationships at work on Amazon, on Barnes and Noble. You can go to my website called formsofrespect.com. That's the book website, and then there's also my company website, which is curiositybased.com. And we have tons of free resources, by the way. We have free quiz, free mini book, and our YouTube channel at Curiosity Based. That has lots of free resources as well. So I would love for your listeners to follow the Curiosity Based on LinkedIn, and you can find me on LinkedIn. That's actually where I'm most active. LinkedIn and YouTube is where I'm most active.
Well, Julie, thanks so much. This was a great conversation. I really do hope that your vision, if your legacy does come true, I think we could do so much better as a world and a community if we learn to understand other people's idea of respect and understand our own, especially because we have so many misunderstandings about what respect and disrespect is. So,
thank you so much, Keith. I so enjoyed this conversation.
You too. You have a great day.
Yes.
Thanks for listening to Becoming Bridge Builder. If you enjoyed this episode and want to help support the podcast, please subscribe and share it with others. Post about it on social media or leave a rating and review. To catch all the latest from me, you can follow me on Instagram at bkeithhaney and on Getter and Twitter at RevHeadpin or on his website at alightbreaksthrough.org. Thanks again and tune in next time.
Do you know that most entrepreneurs hit a revenue ceiling and have no idea why? They're working harder, spending more money, running more ads, but revenue stays flat. My friend Dr. Noah St. John calls this the invisible break. He's giving our listeners a free revenue ceiling audit to help you see what's really holding you back. You'll get a free 30-day membership to Noah Bot, giving you access to Dr. Noah's 30 years of experience to help you reach your next level. But hurry, because there's only 50 available this month. So if you're tired of being stuck at the same revenue level and want to finally break through, get your free revenue ceiling audit at drnoahvault.com in the affiliate link that'll be listed in the show notes.
Thanks for listening to Becoming Bridge Builder. If you enjoyed this episode and want to help support the podcast, please subscribe and share it with others. Post about it on social media or leave a rating and review. To catch all the latest from me, you can follow me on Instagram at bkeithhaney and on Getter and Twitter at RevHeadpin. Thanks again and tune in next time.